clients. And we get a lot of our work from referrals and repeat clients. I'm real curious to see what Silviu has to say here. So please welcome Silviu Stoian.
Thank you so much. Thank you, John.
Yep.
All right. So this will be my own interpretation on how you can get repeat clients. And what's interesting about this talk, I usually give talks on technical workflows and processes. And this is a little bit different because about almost 4 years ago, I started my own company. So obviously I had to figure out how to ensure that we have a continuous stream of income, right? So I just wanted to share my journey, my experience with you, going through that process, and tell you what works for us, and hopefully you'll get something useful out of this. So I want to go back and talk a little bit about my experience, right? So and kind of how I got where I am today. So initially, I started studying structural engineering in almost 20 years ago, and I spent about 5 years doing that, and then decided to move to the U.S. and explored with a few other degrees at Georgia Tech, and then I came across another program, a 2-year program, a master's program that introduced me to the beam process and the reality capture tools and processes. And that gave me the opportunity to spend some time in the field, and about 3 years, and allowed me to learn about how buildings go together, see actually how all that information from the drawings is actually put into use, and they build buildings. And that was extremely helpful. And then I had another opportunity working for a large corporation that does design and construction, integrated firm, that actually offered me the opportunity to use the skills that I learned in the master's program, and I led a company, a little group of about 10 people that focused on bridging the gap between design and construction using technology and reality capture processes. And that combined with this passion that I have for historic buildings, it created, there's an overlap between all these areas of expertise. So as a company, I'm trying to figure out an overlap between them that will allow me to position myself as an individual, as well as position the company in a way that's more unique to the marketplace. And why is that important? Because if you do that, you have the ability to have less competition. You have the ability to ask a higher premium for your service, as well as market yourself easier, right? If you're 1 in a million, it's easier to stand out. So this is how the company that I founded in 2008 came about. And over the last few years, we did a lot of projects in a lot of areas, but we realized quickly that in order to stand out, we need to narrow our field of work. So what's interesting is you look around, you look at other companies, what they're doing, and a lot of them, they're trying to capture a large market share, and they're trying to do everything under the sun, right? We have all these great tools, the scanners, the drones for grammetry, all these processes that allows you to apply technology for a lot of uses. But if you do that, you're not going to be able to show in the top 10 results on searches, or it's hard to be specialized in something if you're trying to do everything, right? So what we did after, I've been doing this for 11 years now, and I realized that probably the best use of our resources and time is to focus on historic preservation, adaptive reuse, and renovation projects. But not only, we go a little bit deeper, and we need to define what kind of projects we're going to be working on, and we decided on buildings that have a historical value, right? That eliminates a lot of other projects. And by narrowing your field of work, that automatically allows you to define a profile for your client. So why is that? Why does that matter? Because you can go out there and target the right audience. Instead of marketing to everyone, you know exactly who you will be talking to. You know exactly who your clients are in that area of operation. So I want to talk a little bit about client acquisition versus client retention. So just a second, the resolution on the screen. All right. What is interesting is that usually people do work with other people or hire other people for three main reasons. One is they hire people that they know, then they hire people that they like, and they hire people that they trust. As long as you meet all those three requirements, you have a client. And it takes a lot of energy when you acquire new clients. Actually, there's a research that says it costs 5 times more to acquire a new client than to make sure that you retain an existing client, right? Because when you look for a new client, you always need to make sure that you go through those 3 steps. You need to make yourself known, you need to make yourself likable, and you need to gain the trust of that potential client. However, if you focus on your existing clients, you just need to maintain the trust, right? So there's less effort in doing that. Also, what's interesting, the same research that they found it takes 5 times more resources to acquire new customers, also found that even though those companies knew that it takes more resources, they continued the same process. Instead of focusing on their existing clients, they're going out and acquiring new clients. So I want to go over all these 3 elements of what it takes for somebody to know you, what it takes for somebody to like you and then trust you. So how do people know you? How do they find you, right? Usually it's web searches, referrals, conferences, or marketing. How about why do they like you? If you have a target audience, it's pretty easy. You're spending time with them, and you might have the same interests, you might share the same values, and you might like, or the client might like your personality, or they realize that you have competency in an area of interest. But the real question is, why do they trust you, right? And usually it's not because of the service or the product that you put out there, but usually is because of the story that your product tells them, right? Is how you make them feel, how your product makes them feel. So in a way, what they're buying from you is a set of emotions, right? Emotions that they'll get at the end of the project, and also how they're going to feel in front of the other project stakeholders. Right, so let's talk a little bit about some of these emotions that a client can get when they work with you. Right, so they might feel pride, satisfaction, confidence, or happiness. Right, that sounds pretty good. Or shame, embarrassment, guilt. What if they hire somebody and they made a mistake? What if the product they delivered didn't meet their expectations? How they're going to face their team because they're just the project manager, right? There are other users involved. Or, I think this is also, not that good. Indifference. You did a mediocre job. You're still on their list of service providers, but you're kind of at the bottom, right? They might use you if all the other ones are not available. So you have a positive set of emotions, and this is what we're looking for. Negative, right? You want to avoid those, and then I call this the friend zone, right? Right. You don't want to be in the friend zone because you don't know if they're repeat client or so. So I wanna tell you a story. We wanna figure out how do we generate those positive emotions with our clients. So I'm gonna tell you a story. It's called Cow Hide and Seek. So if you guys have kids, there's a story that I read to my daughter a few times a week called Cow Hide and Seek. And I think it ties pretty well into what we're trying to achieve here today. So there was this farm, and Farmer John had a bunch of cows. And one night, at the end of the day, he started counting his cows. Started 1, 2, 3, 4, and then there was one cow Basie, and she thought Farmer John was playing hide and seek. So she started running, started to hide behind the cat. That was not a very good hiding spot. And then she started running around trying to find for better hiding spots. And she ended up hiding in all these places where humans had activities, playgrounds and stadiums. But she always would stand out because she was different than all the other ones. And everyone would point at her, there's Basie. And then Farmer John would always be right behind her. At one point, Cow Basie realized that there's a perfect hiding spot, and that was back at the barn. She got inside the barn, and she was with all the other cows. Farmer John was not able to find her, right? She blended in perfectly. So I feel like, we try to copy each other, which, when we start companies, we try to figure things out. We start to copy each other, and we end up being another cow in the field, right? There's no way somebody would distinguish between one cow or another. So what we want to do is, this is a concept that I took from an author called Seth Godin. He has a book called The Purple Cow. What we want to do is, we want to become the purple cow, right? And in order to do that, we want to be remarkable, right? So the way I define, and the way Seth Godin defines this term is that something that's remarkable is something that makes an impression on someone and is worth talking about, right? So to give you an example, if you just drive on a road and there's a field and there are just some cows on that field, you're not going to notice any of them. But if there's a purple cow, you're definitely going to notice that. You go home to your family and you're going to talk about that cow. So what we're trying to do in order to achieve that positive set of emotions in our clients, we need to become the purple cow. We need to stand out and do something that's a little bit different. So who's your client? And who do we serve? Right? We always have a primary contact. If we're working with a company, we always contact the same project manager, or the project manager would contact us for providing a service. But who's our, do we only serve the project manager, or do we have a larger audience, a larger team that we serve? So the project manager is our primary contact. But then we have the B manager. That's also our client. The drafters and designers. If you're working on an architectural job, and every single one values something else. They need something else from you. The project manager might be interested in the budget. How do you interact with them? The customer service, schedule. The B manager, right? They value standards. They value quality of your product. And the drafters, they value accuracy, they care about the level of detail, and to make sure that they have complete information to make decisions at the right time. So we need to satisfy all of these needs, right? They're all our customers. But a lot of times we just stop with the project manager. And the problem with that is that the project manager, in a lot of cases, doesn't have the time or the ability to judge the quality of your work. So you're kind of relying on the team to provide the feedback, the B manager, the drafter, the designers, to provide that feedback to the project manager. However, if you're not serving them and you're not providing a product that's targeted at the entire stakeholder, the project stakeholders, you'll not be able to control that feedback back to the client. So in order to make sure that we do serve the entire team, I usually look at these from like I need to achieve 3 goals. 1 is maximizing the value for the end users, that's the drafters and the designers. 2 is impress the B manager. And 3, make sure that I improve that relationship with the project manager. He's going to be the decision maker next time. So how do we do that? The first thing, and I always do this, is have a discovery meeting. And in that discovery meeting is not just with the project manager, but we try to bring in the B manager in there, and also the key members of the production team. And we talk about the final objectives, the design intent, any concerns, problems, and the risks that this project might have. And when I say the final objective, I'm not talking about just about your scope of work. You need to focus on the scope of work that they need to deliver. Right there, if this is a construction job or a design job, we need to focus on that on that project. Because if you understand their project, you might be able to use that information back in the office once you do production. And then understand their fulfillment process, right? And fulfillment process refers to their workflow. How do they do the work, right? What do they value in terms of their process? What are their resources? What standards are they using? And finally, you prescribe a solution. So the first 2 steps is listening, asking questions and listening, and then you prescribe the solution. You're the expert, right? So this is something that I always try to avoid, is never ask questions like, what do you need? Or how can we help you? That invites the client in a way to self-diagnose. And usually you don't go to the doctor and, the doctor doesn't try to let you self-diagnose, right? They ask you questions to figure out what the problems are, where it hurts. You should do the same thing. You should be the doctor, you should be the expert. Ask questions, listen, and then provide a solution. And so our process, we talked about this discovery meeting. After the discovery meeting, we'll be able to provide that solution. And then we're ready to get to work. We're going to execute that solution into a product that strengthens the story that we told the client, right? So if we focus on our product and we focus on strengthening the story we tell our client, that pretty much generates that positive emotion that we talked earlier. And the benefit of doing this, so this is from a recurring client perspective, is that in order to continue this cycle, in order to impress the client with every delivery, you need to innovate. Innovation doesn't mean that you do something out of the ordinary on every project. It just means that you improve gradually with every delivery. And not only that you innovate, it forces you to always be on top of your game, but also as a bonus, the client is going to become your marketing, your marketing personnel. They're going to be the ones referring you to other clients. All right, so now I want to talk about a few common features that some of these solutions may include. And these are based on some of the feedback that we receive from our clients. And right now they are relating to 3D as-built. So if you're offering other types of services, this might not apply to you, but this is what we find very valuable for our clients. The first one is build a product that looks familiar, right? So don't reinvent the wheel, and what you need to do is to adapt to the client's process. And when I say a product that looks familiar, in that discovery meeting, ask for a few samples. You want to understand, what they're used to.
ask for their templates. If they are using Revit, ask for their Revit templates, their family templates. That way, at the time of delivery, when a team receives that model or product, whatever that product is, everything is as they are used to, right? The object styles, naming conventions, parameters, schedules, everything is the same. Should not be any difference between the product that's developed in-house or developed by you. Actually, what you're trying to do is to improve upon their process. So that's why it is so critical to have that discovery meeting in order to understand their process and what they're expecting as a product. The second is assemble a model to reflect the common construction practices. And this is probably one of the most important steps in delivering a 3D as-built, because it can actually strengthen and or break the relationship with the client. When you assemble a model, regardless of the level of detail, like level of details should not matter. It doesn't matter if you're doing an LOD 100 or 500 or 1,000. Doesn't really matter. There's no LOD 1000, but so what you should care about is to make sure that all the building components are assembled to match how things are put together in the field. And if you do a good job, that also sends a signal to the client. And that signal is that it proves the expertise on understanding constructability. However, if you mess up on this step, it is hard to recover from it. Because all the other aspects of your deliverable, line weights or the components don't behave the way they're supposed to, can be improved. But I don't think you can improve on if you fail at this step. Also, it's hard to train your team to do a better job if they haven't been on a construction site or they haven't been part of a design team. So constructability is a hard topic to train on. The third one is you should never create more work than necessary, right? So don't create extra work for the client. What I mean by this is in that discovery meeting, your job is to understand the design intent, the scope of work from a design standpoint if you're working on a design job. What that helps you is to assemble the model, to break the model into components that will be useful later on in the design process. So for instance, if they're planning to do a lot of demolition, ask them ahead of time, what are you planning to do inside this building? That way it allows you to break your building in a way that will ensure that they can demo those elements without rebuilding those components. So for instance, the way we do it is if we have an exterior wall, we break that wall into 3 different walls: exterior cladding, the core of the wall, and then the interior finish. So if you do it just as one assembly and they actually want to demo the finish, that's going to create a lot more work for the architect to remodel the wall and just break it into subcomponents. And not only that, but you might not think how all the elements that are hosted to those walls will be used later. If they remove a portion of the wall, will that window or door flex so the voids will cut through all of them? So there are a lot of aspects that go into planning to make sure that you include that flexibility into your model with a goal of serving the design process. The fourth is provide the highest level of accuracy, right? And I think this is a fun topic. John and I have been debating on this topic a lot, but you need to consider the functionality of the project. So I'm curious, who thinks that if you produce a deliverable that has a higher level of accuracy, is more expensive than a lower level of accuracy?
Same square footage?
Same square footage.
Should be higher.
Should be more expensive?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I tend to disagree, but
I would say there's an assumed degree of accuracy given the data source that you're working from.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get tighter than that, you need to get tighter source data to begin with, and that increases your cost. It's not necessarily at the modeling end, it's at the source data.
Yeah. So I define the level of accuracy as being a function of two variables. So one is functionality, the other one is the condition of a building, right? You might have a building where all the elements are, plumb, square, or you might be documenting a castle. So the two different projects have different as-built conditions, right? So those two variables can define how accurate your project can be. One thing that I stopped doing is we stopped guaranteeing accuracy for the models or for the drawings, because it's not something that you can guarantee from the beginning, right? You can guarantee the measured accuracy of your data, but you don't know what you're going to get once you start modeling. So one thing that we do is we use the LOA spec, which is a great tool to define the accuracy intent, right? So the client defines a range, and then we ask them, if we find elements, given the specifications regarding functionality, if we find elements that are outside of that LOA, what would you like us to do? And usually, we flag those elements. But in terms of functionality, we have 4 components here: flatness and levelness. And I consider these two not up for discussion. We're not even considering taking a slab and breaking it into subcomponents to reflect any deflection or to reflect any deviation from the level, right? It's not practical. But then you have plumbness, and this you might have up for discussion, especially with the 2020 Revit. Now you can model slanted walls. And then orthogonality, right? This is something that definitely is up for discussion, and there are projects where you do need to represent walls exactly the way they are in the field, and you do a best match to the point cloud, best fit to the point cloud. But when you do that, obviously your accuracy increases. However, you're losing something that I think is pretty critical, and that is you're losing the ability to dimension between walls because they're not parallel. When you cut section through those elements, again, it's very hard to detail because they're not going to be perpendicular on that particular view. So it definitely introduces some challenges if you are not going to model all the elements orthogonal. So there's a relationship between the functionality of your product and accuracy. What do you think that relationship is? Yeah, inversely proportional. So if you want to have a more functional product, you need to be okay with a lower accuracy, right? You're starting to introduce more error. So I'll give you a few examples here of what we do to flag some of these elements. Actually, this is a project that John and I worked together, and his team and I worked together, and was a very, very interesting project. So on this project, we had a specified accuracy of about plus minus 5/8 of an inch, so LOA 30, right? So what we did was we marked every single element that was outside of that level of accuracy. And some might produce some sort of reports, like printed reports, or just simple lists of elements. But what if you include that information inside the model with your product? So that's what we did here. Every element that's green, that's within the specified LOA. Every element that is outside the LOA is marked in red. And you go even further than that, and you include some additional information in there, comments that specify why you model things the way you model them. So for instance, some of the walls were not plumb, right? You just make sure that is communicated to the end user. Or you have the roof, you might have a deflection. And again, you make sure that information is included with the model. And what happens is this opens a discussion at during the review meeting, if you have one of those at the end, and the client might tell you if some of these elements are critical for design. So in that case, this is actually an opportunity to offer additional services where if they're interested in further analyzing some of these elements, you can do some deviation analysis, provide some heat maps for those particular surfaces. Another thing that you can do in terms of accuracy, you can take this even further, and this is an idea that was inspired by Lenmar Services. So there are deviations from, every time you create a model or a drawing, you're going to deviate from a perfect as-built condition. So you might have elements that are damaged, you might have elements that are not captured 100%, so they're partially covered. You might have elements that you scan only one face or a couple of faces of those elements, and you need to make some assumptions. So every time you introduce or you make assumptions, you introduce some sort of error in the model, you need to document that somehow. And we do it also in the model, and we color code it. We have about 7 different deviations from that perfect as-built condition. And yeah, some of them might be, deflection not modeled, elements partially damaged. So you can see it here in this image that we have a few colors. So this is a very useful tool to maximize that transactional value at handoff. The 5th one is we need to make proper use of family categories if you're working in Revit. And obviously, we should avoid in-place components 100% of the time. Why that matters is because if the client has, we deliver a 3D product to a client. However, the client, if he's an architect, their product is still 2D, right? They're producing drawings. And if you're not using the proper categories and they're not built the way they're supposed to, the line weights, they're gonna, not match their own, they're not gonna match with their standards. Maybe some of these families will not cut properly. So you need to make sure that you are using the right family categories. And also it is critical for schedules, right? They might schedule some of your components, and if you're using something else, that might not work. All right, and the last one is regarding performance. So recently I had a client that sent me a model that was done by a third party. And we need to make sure that whenever we deliver our products to our client, we need to keep in mind that we are the first ones that are part of this project. So the design haven't even started. So this client sends me a model, and he complains that the model is not performing well. So, the first thing that I do, I open the model and I look at the list of warnings. What's interesting, this model had 6,000 warnings right from the get-go, and it was just a structural model, right? And you can imagine every time you synchronize, you save to central or locally, Revit will try to go through all that, through that entire list and figure out if those warnings were resolved. So my recommendation is keep those warnings. I think right now the consensus is about 250. Try to target 0 if you can have a model with no warnings. That would be great. And my suggestion is make sure that you address every single warning when it shows on your screen. Do not let them pile up until the end of the project. But another thing that will affect the performance is obviously the content that you create. So how you're treating your content, what formulas you're introducing in that content will definitely affect the size of each family, and then will ultimately affect the size of your model. If you're doing a lot of historic preservation, a lot of buildings with architectural details, find a balance between the 3D components and 2D details, right? We're trying to create some sort of hybrid. That way it will satisfy the client, and when they're creating elevation sections, all of those details will still show, but the model will be pretty fast, and it's not going to affect the performance that much. And instead of doing when you're putting together your model, instead of using voids, try to use extrusions and all the other forms of modeling to represent this the geometry, right? So we're at the end, so I wanna go through what we talked. So in order to have repeat clients, at least this is what we found out after a few years, is that it is very important to narrow your position, right? So make sure that your company is in the top 10 for a specific offering, and you are viewed as the expert in the field. And that will allow you to define a profile for the perfect client, and then will help you to qualify those clients and figure out if there's a good fit between you and that company. Third, take the time to understand the entire scope of work. Have that discovery meeting and make sure that you're going to satisfy the needs of every project stakeholder. And then then the fourth one is to focus on your client fulfillment process and improve it with every delivery. That way you'll ensure that your product is remarkable, and also you'll be able to innovate with each delivery. So if you guys want to connect or have any questions, just use the QR code and it will take you to my LinkedIn page. But if you have questions, we're just 20 minutes, right? We have 20 more minutes.
Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Yeah, I was planning to finish in 45, I guess, so we went a little bit faster. Yes?
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about. I'd love to hear you talk a little more about the relationship between functionality and accuracy, and kind of how you. Because I think I understand what you're saying, especially with a specific example like the plumbness of a wall.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear how you straddle that line and how you define and justify. This is why we're giving up on this much accuracy for the sake of functionality. How do you relay that to your client?
All right. So in terms of functionality, right, I try to present, first of all, I try to present the downsides. A lot of times that is not specified. A lot of clients, they might not realize that if you're trying to be very accurate, right? If you're working for an architect, they might say, I want the most accurate product as possible. And you just start telling them what the downsides are, right? And your job is to figure out how you can balance that functionality with the accuracy. So what we personally do is, before we even start drawing an element or modeling an element, we're going to take our point cloud and we're going to bring it into Revit or CAD, whatever we're using, and we're going to try to position that in a way that at least 90% of the elements are going to be orthogonal, and those elements will be within the specified LOA. So if the LOA is 5/8 of an inch, we're going to try to rotate that, because it doesn't matter if you're using state plane and that's geo-referenced. In Revit, you'll be able to set the orientation to true north, right? So you're going to define that orientation, that rotation to true north, in a way that allows you for at least 95% of the elements to be modeled or drawn orthogonally, and then you have the rest 5% that are going to be outside of that accuracy. In that case, so usually what we do is we spend about a day to figure out. We'll look at every single level, every single long corridor, everything to ensure that, hey, if we move this 0.08 degrees, whatever, how is it going to affect all the other elements? So we take the entire project, we look at it from the orthogonality standpoint. And if we see that 50% of the elements, and it happened on a project where the project was almost a parallelogram, it was not even a rectangular building, we just present that to the client. And we have a discussion and we come up with a plan. And we ask them, Do you want to model these walls orthogonal? If we do that, we're going to be off by 6 inches. That's way outside of that specified LOA. So it's just a negotiation and make sure that the information that they get at the end of the project is clear, and they have sufficient information to make decisions. But it's just a balancing act, and the first step is to analyze your data and understand what are the challenges regarding plumbness and orthogonality. And you cannot do that until you have a registered project and you start working with it. And you cannot say that before you start a project. Yeah.
Would love to hear some about your client satisfaction. How do you gauge that? Do you have a survey you guys use, or what does it look like after you've delivered the project?
So after about a month, we just let them use the data, right? Use the whatever deliverables we sent out, and then we sent out I believe 7 questions, and they're all regarding accomplishments, right? They're not like how did you feel about this? Did we do a good job? No, they're very specific questions that are related to the product and the process. That way, if we get back answers, it will allow us to integrate those questions. It's a feedback loop. So we are innovative, and our next project will be better. So they're focused on the process and on the product, not about how they felt about it. I think that's a given, right? If they like that, they'll have a positive emotion. But if they say I'm happy with it, that doesn't actually help me to improve the process. But if they tell me something specific, then I can use that in the next project. Yeah.
Hey, Silviu. So not that this would ever happen to you, but let's just say you missed something, screwed something up, didn't model it in the right place. And let's say that client has been working on that file after delivery maybe a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle the client relationship in that scenario?
We try to solve the problem. We sometimes make mistakes, and we always try to make it right, regardless of how time or how many resources will take. I think what the client remembers is how you respond to any problem, how you solve that problem. I think that's what matters, is how you respond to any given problem. I don't know. What do you guys think? What is the best approach? What's your approach?
We'll definitely help try to solve it. Sometimes it's out of your hands at that point. It's it can be kind of out of your hands as far as actually fixing the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose giving the best advice to that clientele on how to fix it, or offering anything that you can,
Mm-hmm.
but absolutely not saying, "Hey, we screwed up. We're sorry," but actually going.
Usually, just sorry is not going to satisfy.
Correct.
But one thing that we always encourage is have a good quality assurance program, not quality control, but quality assurance, right? So that quality happens while you're producing the deliverable. You should have a quality control program, but if you have a quality assurance program, those situations, if there are going to be any problems, they're going to be minor, not something that we screwed up by feet, right? Or maybe we forgot something. We forgot to add something that was in the contract. That's easy to fix. You just go in there and you spend a day or two and add that extra information. And especially with some of these new tools like BIM 360 design. We started using those platforms with the clients. They are in the models a week after we start documenting the building, so they can extract some information from there if they want to. But now if something happens, you can still get in there after you deliver without affecting their work. You're working in a different phase in the project, so it's not actually affecting their work.
If I could just throw one more question in.
Sure.
So I know you talk about having a kickoff meeting with the clientele, and a lot of times we come across clientele that is kind of uneducated, and they come into it saying, we actually don't know what we want. Go out there and just scan everything, and we'll see what we come up with. Are you able to get kind of a high percentage on the kind of kickoff meetings with these clientele?
Yeah, Yeah, actually, yes. So actually, those types of clients, because I do like to work with sophisticated clients. It's easier. It's easier to sell, and it's easier to prove the value. But those clients also sometimes they self-diagnose themselves, right? So it's easier to work with people that they don't know exactly what they want, and then at that point, you just ask the questions and try to understand what the problems. Get to the core of the problem, and then it's a pretty easy sell if they have the budget. Also, you need to understand if they're a good fit for you, right? And that's something that I'm still learning. It's a very complicated, I guess, topic. How do you pick the right client? How do you make sure that the company as a whole, because you might be working with one person, but you have to deal with the entire company. How do you make sure that there's a good fit between the companies? So it is a learning process, and I think business in general, I wish there was a guide somewhere, right? It would tell you what to do. But yeah.
Silviu, I have a question.
Sure.
So regarding the discovery meetings and trying to better understand your client's needs, I'm curious at what stage are you really, you kind of need to know at the proposal stage what their needs are, right, to propose?
Correct, yeah. You do that, you try to have that discovery meeting before you sign.
Okay, so you do it in advance of winning.
Otherwise, you cannot prescribe a solution.
And then do you have any kind of, other kickoff meeting, if you will?
Yes.
What's the distinction between the discovery and the kickoff meeting at that point?
The kickoff meeting, you discuss things in a little bit more detail. You don't talk about the problem in general. You talk about the process, your process. You present the solution in more detail, and see if they have any feedback. So at that stage you can discuss about the accuracy, right? You're asking about the accuracy. That's where you present a few scenarios. Hey, in this case, if the project is skewed, we might have another meeting after we draw a conclusion. So you just talk about the process. You just describe what you're going to do step by step.
So I have a quick question here. I know that you mentioned early on that it's easier oftentimes to keep or maintain existing clients as opposed to hunting for new clients.
Correct.
Is there a means or a method that your company uses to re-engage those existing clients, previous clients? Does it, if you haven't heard from a client for, let's say, a couple of years, you want to kind of re-engage, is there a process that you guys have for that?
So ideally, that's a very good question. How often do you engage those existing clients? And ideally, you want to have a list of clients of 10 to 20, right? To make sure that those 10, 20 clients will provide you enough work to sustain your business. And at that point, if you pick the right clients, I don't think you're going to have like a year passing between engagements. And actually, I don't want to say you want to stay away from those like one-offs, but if you can find a client that can provide you steady work in a year, that's basically you're going to be the go-to person for that particular work. And again, in the beginning of the presentation, I talked about positioning, right? So if you're like in top 10, top 5 in the country that can do that work, you're going to be the top. They're going to be the first one that they're going to come in mind when they have a problem that you can solve. Yeah, if there are 1,000 companies, they might forget about you, and you need to send them emails. Hey, I'm still here, or a Christmas card.
Gotcha.
But yeah, ideally, you want to pick clients that have sufficient volume and that will provide a steady flow of work in a year.
So, and that also kind of aligns clients whose work aligns with your
Correct.
type of...
So, for instance, the type of work that I'm doing, it's like I can only pick, like in my area, I have about 20 companies, right? So it's like Gensler, Perkins and Will, HOK, like the large architectural firms that they have 20 renovation projects in a year.
Understood.
Right? So depending on the type of work, you just pick the right clients.
Yeah, got it.
Hi, I've got an operational question for you. So something that has happened at our company is I think we have a hard time having an open mind from project to project where so some client wanted A, B, C, and D, and they considered that an excellent deliverable. And then we seem to not forget that, and we're going to end up giving that to everybody, whether they want it or not. I don't know if you've encountered that, if you've done, and so I'm actually a business coach for a company I'm representing here, and I keep telling them, that that's bleeding their profits away. I mean, they have to be able to
Adapt.
ask that question, and on every project, it's what that client wants. So do you have a method? Is there any way that you're able to make everybody have a short-term memory and realize that this client only wants A and B? After we talked to them, after we had our meeting with them, and yes, most of the others want A, B, and C for that same exact thing, but they only want A and B, so we're only going to give them A and B.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Actually, you mentioned that. Do you adapt from client to client? But actually, it happens with the same client, right? Sometimes you go in there, you have that discovery meeting, and something changes, right? A need changes, so you have to adapt. You do have, because I think companies are, they want to deliver the same thing over and over again because they have their own process, right? And it's efficient, but we're not an assembly line, unfortunately, or I don't know. So you have to adapt, and the problem, at least in the U.S., I think UK and the rest of Europe, I think is a little bit better. There are no standards when it comes to documentation. There are no standards when it comes to how you apply BIM, right? The Building Information Models system. So you take, for instance, Gensler versus Perkins and Will. They have completely different needs, completely different standards. So you need to take the information that they give you and try to see how can you plug that into your process. Make your process flexible. That will allow for kind of a plug and play, so you can adapt quickly. So it's just how you design your own process that will allow that flexibility. If you're rigid, then going back to what I said about innovating on every project. If you're rigid, you're going to want to go after new clients, because at that point you don't want to you don't have to change, right? You're going to sell the same product over and over to different clients, and there's no reason for you to change. But if you're working with the same client and you need to impress him with every deliverable to make sure that everything is positive, then innovation is kind of forced on you. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. Just we with our situation is we don't.
In our situation, we adapt okay, consistently getting better. We don't know how to take care of somebody who doesn't want the better. Does that make sense?
In terms of quality, or in terms of
it could be quality or functionality. How you were talking about the inverse.
Yeah.
Right? So once we figure out how to give you the best quality, we have a very hard time listening to the next client who doesn't want that much quality and would rather have more functionality, let's say, right? We beat our heads, well, we're still going to give you that quality, but we'll figure out how to get your functionality, but yet.
Yeah, so I think the functionality and accuracy, that's a a discussion that can go in either direction, and you can adjust your process pretty easily. In terms of quality, if somebody says, I don't, if you produce a high quality product and the client doesn't value that, it's like, you're a car manufacturer, you produce Bentleys, right? And you have a target audience for your Bentley. Somebody says, I want a Toyota Corolla, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, sorry, we only produce Bentleys here. You know, if you want to buy a Bentley, we're the right fit. If you don't, you know, there's the next company next door.
Just don't
So
don't
quality,
sell them the Bentley for the price of the Kia.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things sometimes we fall into. But
Yeah.
thanks, it makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Yeah, my question was more on the, you talked about getting on the first pages of Google, and I was just curious of your strategy and tactics to do some search engine.
I'm a mess. I'm a mess here.
Yeah.
In terms of like how people find me, I mean, it's still through referrals. But I mean, if you, I tried this a few weeks ago where I used a set of keywords to see if I even show on the first page. No, right? There are all these companies that are buying ads, and it's kind of hard to compete with companies that have hundreds of employees, and they might have a team of 10 that they do marketing, right? And they crank out marketing, blogs and whatever. So those will show up, and on the first, second page. And but I think if you're going to focus on retaining clients, I think it's critical just in the beginning to make sure that you're easy to be found. Because at that stage, if you have a list of 10, 20 clients that you maintain, I think statistically you change clients every 3 to 5 years. So, and at that point, that pool of clients, 10 to 20, will definitely going to bring you other clients, right? But you still need to maintain an online presence and have, because I think it's good for you, right? It also attracts not only clients but attracts talent that they want to join your company. Yeah. So yeah, with the web, you're trying to play the the ranking game. I think it's, I don't know, it's tough, right? I mean, what do you guys do? Like
me?
Oh, Eric.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I will. I will answer your question. I myself, and I'm not taking away from Silviu's time, I really don't want to do that. That was an excellent presentation, by the way. Can we clap for him real quick? He's actually really good at speaking. And he looks like Superman about to bust out of his Clark Kent, too. So good for you. Search engine optimization is absolutely crucial for any new business. You have to ensure that your website's keywords, its URLs, its imagery is all in sync with what Google is looking for. And he's right. There are companies with huge marketing teams where they have an entire department dedicated to SEO or search engine optimization. That's what that means. So it's difficult to compete with those. But it doesn't mean you should just drop the mic and walk away. You should absolutely set aside a budget to invest in Google Ads, also invest in social media marketing, because, and I think it was you that was, or maybe it was the previous session, somebody was mentioning social media and how big of a role it is and how, like, they could talk for an hour about it. I could do the same thing. You have to be visible. And being on social media now, especially in this day and age, in the TikTok generation, you have to make yourself present, okay? And I'm not saying this because I'm the AV guy here. I actually am working with the USIBD and John Russo up there on stage. I'm social media manager for not only USIBD, but his other company, ARC. So I've done this kind of research for years, and I continue to do it for them. And, I'm happy to provide that kind of service for anybody else here who might need that. So search engine optimization, 1. Google Ads, 2. Social media presence, 3. And also on social media, there's opportunities to invest in ads there. Set aside a budget for that too. A lot of companies or a lot of people have that budget the same as their Google budget. You could separate it depending on your business, whatever you want to do. But those 4 components are best for marketing yourself if you're a new business or a small to medium-sized business. So I hope I contributed in a way that's okay.
You definitely did. But what I want to add to that is that, we're talking about that, how you position yourself. So if you're working in a niche market, then it's going to be easier for people to find you. Because usually, let's say you do historic preservation. So, an architect will just type architectural survey for historic preservation. If you're like, the one or in only 10 companies, probably you're going to show up in that search result. If you're going to be doing just as-built documentation for all types of buildings, I mean, there are like hundreds of companies that do that, right? Those are just more generic search words versus more specific for the type of work that you do. So it kind of ties into the SEO, right? What kind of keywords? So the keywords should align with the type of work that you provide.
Great, and I think we're at time here. We've got an hour break before the next session. If you guys want to keep going, Silviu wants to keep going, we can do that. We can run into the break. Or
I think you had one more question.
Yeah, let's do it.
You had a question?
Yeah, I did. Give me a second. It goes back to us stuff.
Yeah, I would say that even for us, I think to kind of piggyback off what was said already. I think Google Ads is important. I think that certain keywords and stuff. I mean, we kind of early on we worked with a company that kind of helped us set up a little bit of that, which kind of took a little bit of labor off of us because we're not experts on that front. So, but it's a little bit of trial and error, of course, just like anything else. Putting the right keywords. I mean, we found out really quick the word scanner or scanning has. We kind of blew our budget out within like 3 days, I think. Our month-long budget. So you have to be kind of careful how you use that. And I think also, generating new content, I think, is also kind of key. So if you're able to kind of keep your website fresh on a monthly basis with, some news feed or some new projects that you put in, or having a little blurb or some little blog going every month, that kind of helps the relevancy improve and increase, and helps you be a little bit more fine-tuned. And like you said, also having a little bit more of a niche in terms of what you're doing. I think that also gives you a little bit more of a narrow target, and helps instead of just being extremely broad, you kind of hone in the right people.
The other advice I would give, I love LinkedIn. It's a great platform, or all the other social media platforms. But a lot of times you see all of these posts that basically translate to look at me, look at what I'm doing, right? And I don't think in general that provides any value to your audience. So if you understand who your audience is, who your target client is, try to provide some value in terms of education. Put together, it's called education-based marketing, right? You're giving some information for free to make decisions in the future, but at the same time, you position yourself as the expert. When there's a problem coming up, on the radar, they're always going to think about, Daniel, he's the one that has been posting all these articles about my problem, so I'm going to contact his firm. So education-based marketing, I think, is more powerful than just bombarding people with look at the job that I'm doing. And I see that a lot on LinkedIn, and usually I just scroll. I don't even take a look at them, right, unless it's something that brings value to me.
True. Yeah.
All right.
Great. Well, how did you guys enjoy this? Did you like this presentation?
Yep.
Yeah? Can we give Silviu a hand here?
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Again, we got an hour break.